The sun was warm on the windshield of his 2022 sedan, the air conditioning humming a quiet tune against the monotony of the highway. Michel was an architect, a man who believed in blueprints, in physics, in predictable outcomes. His world was one of straight lines and calculated angles. The project he was driving to was 100 miles from the city, a routine site inspection he had done a dozen times before. The road was familiar, a trusted friend. He glanced at the clock on the dashboard, 2:17 p.m. He was making good time. He turned up the volume on his podcast, a discussion about quantum computing, letting the complex ideas wash over him. It was then that he first saw it. Up ahead, standing in the middle of his lane, was a deer. Not grazing, not startled, just standing. It was perfectly still, its head tilted as if listening to a sound he couldn't hear. Michel slowed the car, his hand hovering over the horn, but there was no need. The deer was unnaturally calm. Its stillness was absolute, like a photograph. He brought the car to a complete stop, maybe 50 feet away. He blinked, and in that fraction of a second, the world felt wrong. The deer hadn't moved a muscle, but the leaves on the trees behind it seemed to have frozen mid-sway. The podcast in his car had gone silent. The only sound was the thrum of his own engine. He felt a strange pressure in his ears, a low hum that vibrated through the car seat. And then, as quickly as it began, it was over. The leaves rustled again. The sounds of the world rushed back in, and the deer, with a casual flick of his ear, trotted gracefully off the road and disappeared into the woods. Michel let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. A weird moment of highway hypnosis, perhaps. A trick of the light. He shook his head, dismissed it, and pressed down on the accelerator. The car moved forward. He passed the spot where the deer had stood. Everything seems normal, for about a minute. Then he noticed the trees. They were different, denser, older. The familiar pine and oak had been replaced by massive, unfamiliar species with dark, broad leaves that seemed to swallow the sunlight. The pristine asphalt of the highway had given way to a cracked, two-lane country road overgrown with weeds. His GPS was blank, displaying only a single pulsing dot in a sea of gray. No signal. Panic, cold and sharp, began to prickle at the edges of his rational mind. He must have taken a wrong turn, though he couldn't remember seeing one. He kept driving, convinced that this strange road would eventually reconnect with the highway. He drove for 10 minutes, then 20. The same ancient trees, the same cracked road, looping endlessly. He passed a uniquely shaped, moss-covered boulder. 10 minutes later, he passed the exact same boulder again. He slammed on the brakes. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. The road wasn't leading him anywhere. It was leading him back to itself. He tried to turn the car around, but as he completed the U-turn, the engine sputtered, coughed, and died. He turned the key. Nothing. Again. Nothing but a dead, hopeless click. Defeated, Michel got out of the car. The air here was different, heavy, humid, and filled with the scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic and vaguely sweet. The silence was absolute, broken only by the buzz of unseen insects. He was well and truly lost. He chose a direction and started to walk, the silence of the forest pressing in on him. After what felt like an hour, through a break in the trees, he saw it. Smoke. A thin gray tendril curling into the afternoon sky. Hope surged through him, and he quickened his pace, stumbling through the undergrowth until he emerged into a clearing. It wasn't a town, not a real one. It was a haphazard collection of about 20 cabins and makeshift houses arranged in a rough circle around a central well. The buildings were a strange mix of styles. Some looked like old colonial-era log cabins. Others were built with modern siding and corrugated metal. A small, neatly tended field of corn stood to one side, looking unnervingly perfect. The place was powered. A single string of electric bulbs was strung between two poles, glowing softly in the daylight. There were people, a few of them, moving with a slow, deliberate pace. They saw him, and their movements ceased. Every eye turned towards him, not with aggression, but with a weary, profound sadness. A woman detached herself from the group and walked towards him. She looked to be in her late 40s, with a weathered face, sun-streaked hair tied back, and eyes that had seen too much. She carried a woodsman's axe with a practiced ease that suggested it was more than just a tool. "She road got you too, huh?" she said, her voice raspy but clear. It wasn't a question. "Where am I?" Michel stammered, his architect's mind failing to categorize, to understand. The short answer? We call it Haven. The long answer? Well, you'll have a lot of time for that. She introduced herself as Serah. She was, for all intents and purposes, the leader of this small, impossible community. She led him through the settlement, explaining the reality of his new situation with a brutal, dispassionate honesty. The road he came on was one of 5 such roads, the gates, that led into this valley. People had been arriving for years, some for decades. A man they passed, silently mending a fence, was wearing clothes from the 1980s. Serah herself had arrived 12 years ago, a hiker who took a wrong turn on the Appalachian Trail. Her trail, like his road, had simply bent. "You can't leave," she stated, pointing back towards the forest. "Walk in any direction for as long as you can. Eventually, you'll find yourself right back here. The forest is a prison and the walls are a loop." "But the electricity, the water from the well?" asked Michel, his architect's mind grasping for logic. "It's just here," Serah shrugged. "The lights are always on. The well never dries up. The crops grow a little too fast. Don't try to understand it. That's the first mistake. Learn to accept it. That's the first rule of survival." Michel looked up at the sky. A bird, a common-looking sparrow, was flying overhead, and for a single jarring moment, it froze. It hung in the air, motionless, a perfect taxidermy specimen against the blue canvas of the sky. He blinked, rubbing his eyes, and the bird resumed its flight as if nothing had happened.
"Did you see that?" he asked, pointing upwards. Serah's eyes narrowed, but she didn't look up. "See what? Don't go chasing shadows, new guy. Your mind will play tricks on you here, especially in the beginning." Her dismissal was too quick, too practiced. It was the first time he felt she was hiding something. She walked him to a small, empty cabin at the edge of the settlement. "You can stay here. There's food in the pantry. It restocks itself. Another thing you don't question. For now, just rest. But I need you to listen to me very, very carefully. This is the most important rule, more important than anything else." She leaned in, her voice dropping to a low, serious whisper. "No matter what happens, no matter what you think you hear, you must be inside with the door bolted before the sun sets. The day is ours, but the night belongs to them." "Them?" Michael asked, a cold dread washing over him. Serah's face was grim. She wouldn't elaborate. "Be inside before sundown. That's all you need to know." Michael spent the rest of the afternoon in a daze, his mind reeling. He sat on the porch of his new prison, watching the sun begin its slow descent towards the horizon. The other residents of Haven began to retreat into their homes, a silent, practiced ritual. Doors were bolted. Heavy wooden shutters were closed over windows. The cheerful string of lights now seemed pathetic, a tiny bastion against a coming darkness. As the last sliver of the sun disappeared behind the impossibly tall trees, the world changed. The temperature dropped instantly. The familiar, friendly sounds of the forest, the crickets, the rustling leaves, died all at once, replaced by a silence so complete it felt like a physical weight. It was a listening silence. Michael sat inside his cabin, the door bolted, his heart pounding in his chest. He was a man of science, of logic. This was impossible. A mass delusion, a strange cult. There had to be an explanation. And then he heard it. It started far away, a sound from deep within the forest. It was not the sound of an animal. It was a soft, rhythmic scraping, the sound of something heavy being dragged through dry leaves. Then another sound joined it, a whisper. Not words, just a sibilant, breathy sound that seemed to come from all directions at once. It was a sound that imitated a human whisper, but was fundamentally wrong, like a recording played backwards. The scraping grew closer. It was circling the settlement, circling his cabin. Michael backed away from the door, his breath caught in his throat. He could hear the whispers outside his window now, a chorus of inhuman sounds that promised nothing but malice. He could feel a vibration through the floorboards as the heavy, scraping thing passed by his door. He didn't know what was out there. He didn't know what they wanted. But in that moment, huddled in the dark of his cabin, Michael understood one thing with absolute certainty. Serah was right. He was no longer on a road he recognized. He was in a place where the fundamental contract with reality had been broken. The day was for survival, the night was for fear, and this was only the first of many nights to come. The test had just begun.